There was a vague sensation of floating. I was beside myself, my mind ever trapped in the past, my face betraying no hint of emotion. I went to and from locations, following Clarence around with only the faintest recollection as to why my legs carried me from room to room. Somewhat vaguely, I recalled them giving me a cocktail of pills earlier. How long ago had that been? Days? Weeks? I couldn't be certain. My mind was in a bog so thick that I was in two places at once. The life drained out of me, my soul strained to its absolute limit. Conversations hung barely at the edge of comprehension. Twisting corridors and sullen students with indeterminable facial expressions that caused no reaction, no emotion to flutter from within the confines of my hardened husk-like shell of a body, transformed into a single street from my past. Baker Street, where the asphalt was nearly worn away to uneven patches and gravel from decades of improper road maintenance, where the poor and the downtrodden lived. But then, the poor and the downtrodden was a great description for all those who lived within the confines of what had once been New Mexico. I remembered this day. The sun was beating down overhead, threatening to blister my skin. My friend, what was his name again? Walked by my side, eager to do the thing we'd been talking about doing for weeks. We were going to throw rocks over the wall and see if we couldn't hit a brown shirt in the face. We weren't sure if there were any more brown shirts, but we desperately wanted to find out after our teacher's last history lesson. We lived on the border of what used to be we lived on the, we lived on the border of what had used to be New America, God's country as some called it. The wall was just a remnant of a crumbling theocracy, a far cry from the bastion of hope and freedom it had been in the 20th century. They had waged a war against the rest of the world so brutal that it was a wonder that it was still possible to stand on the surface of the earth without needing a radiation suit. There were still pockets of them living within the confines of their shattered country, but the rest of the world had largely moved on. Even now, with the scattered smaller countries that had sprouted up beyond the wall to the west, the memory was still fresh. The Earth was on its way to recovering, some said. There were still the megacorporations to deal with. They had been part of the reason for the Great War. Their greed knew no end, and even now, with a new generation running them, it seemed that we hadn't learned our lesson. To give a thing that doesn't live the same rights as a living being is unthinkable. It is a mistake, and yet it is. My friend's skin. What color had it been again? Brown? Sunburned Caucasian? I wasn't sure. I knew that she often commented on my heritage, asked me what it was like to be Mexican. It was hard to say what it even meant anymore. After the war, New Mexico had become part of the California Republic, along with Nevada and Arizona. So if anything, wasn't I Californian? I certainly didn't feel like I'd be welcome in Mexico. My father was one of those people who remembered the war with misguided nostalgia, even believing some of the propaganda that New America's high priest had spewed before he was even born. The promises of a better world, a Christian world. Even when I was a child, when my father recounted these ideas, the glint of wonder in his eyes, as he no doubt imagined the heathens of the earth being burned at the stake, had made my skin crawl. It didn't matter to him that he himself wouldn't be welcome beyond the wall in God's country. It was all God's will, even if we were slaughtered or burned away from the face of the earth by nuclear fire. Eventually, we reached the wall. It towered overhead like the crumbling, decrepit body of some eldritch beast. Its face was littered with patches of crumbling stone, and the sun's light cast shadows into the belly of the wall, where you could see the inner structure of it. I had to remind myself that they'd been defeated, that the world was healing, science was progressing once more, schools and universities were reopening or being built, and the population was recovering, transforming into something different than it had been before. In a few short years, humans would once again be walking on the moon, and then Mars would be colonized. Still, my fear had beaten at the walls of my ribcage even before it had been determined that we would climb that monstrosity of a barrier. It was not the wall's height that was terrifying. It was the fact that we didn't know what we'd see once we reached the top and peered over the edge. My memory of the event was so vivid, so real, that I was not entirely sure if my time on Mars was merely a fever dream, an illusion brought on by the terrible heat of the New Mexico sun. Maybe my mother wasn't dead. Maybe there was time to warn her of the terrible future I'd seen. My skin felt both the stale cold air of Olympus One and the blazing blistering heat of the summer breeze against my skin. Their simultaneous touch was enough to drive me into madness, to accept both realities as fact. There was something else in the memory, something that I wasn't quite sure had happened, if anything had happened at all. My dirty brown hands found areas of loosened stone where the wire mesh above the support structure of the wall was exposed. The exposed bits of stone were unstable, still crumbling from a lack of maintenance since the end of the war, but somehow we didn't break our necks scaling it. The thing I saw once I reached the top, I knew it was only my imagination. It had to be. There was no way that this thing had happened, caused my arms to freeze and my grip to almost slip from the edge. My friend was already there, already up, and he gave me a helping hand with a dirty smile. She didn't see what I saw. He was still just a memory. I wanted so badly to shout to him, to point into the distance, into the blackened hills and the ruined buildings, where violent mantis creatures roamed the streets, hunting. There were millions of them. They lit the blackened, bomb-scarred hillsides like twinkling stars in a cold desert night. They're here, I thought, perhaps from the one place in my brain not coated in a thick layer of medicated fog. I brought them here. They'll kill everyone. My friend was tugging at a loose bit of concrete, wrenching it free from the wire mesh underneath. He held the chunk in his hand, gave me a wry grin. She couldn't see my terror, couldn't see them. The damn fool. I could not speak. I could only look on in horror and hope that they did not see us. To my horror, my friend wound his small arm up, reached back as far as she could without falling off balance, and tossed the chunk of cement into the distance, where it created a small plume of dust that was almost impossible to see from where we sat. Their featureless mantis heads jerked toward us. I could sense them feeling out, tugging at my atoms, searching for something soft and squishy to cut to pieces. Every one of them. They could see me. Maybe they could see him too. All right, well, you'll have to find out how that scene ends because we're absolutely out of time. Yeah. But seriously, book is on sale for 99 cents. Get it while it's not banned, I guess.